For 8 months, nobody saw him. The veteran who slept in a tent by the river, who'd serve his country with honor, but couldn't find his way home, who'd mastered the art of being invisible. Until the day a young woman's kayak capsized in the rapids, her father on the shore 60 yards away, helpless and terrified. That's when 24-year-old Eli dove into freezing water and did something impossible. Something he'd learned in the Marines, but thought he'd never use again. 72 hours later, 23 Hells Angels would roll into that quiet town. Not for revenge, for something nobody expected. This is the story of how the invisible become undeniable. Before we go any further, I want to ask something of you. If you believe that veterans deserve better than what our system gives them, that the people society overlooks often have the most to offer, would you take just a moment to subscribe to this channel? It's a small gesture, but it tells me that stories like Eli's matter to you. And if this story moves you, please share it with someone who needs to remember that heroes don't always look like what we expect. Your support means everything. Thank you. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. It was 3:47 on a Saturday afternoon in early April when Emma Shaw's world turned upside down. The Clearwater River was running high that spring, fed by mountain snowmelt that made the water fast and cold and dangerous. But Emma had been kayaking these waters since she was 16. She knew every rock, every rapid, every place where the current got tricky, or so she thought. She was 22 years old, home for the weekend from State University, where she was finishing her degree in environmental science. The sun was warm on her face, the water sparkled like diamonds, and she felt that particular kind of freedom that only comes from being completely in your element. Her bright yellow kayak cut through the current with practiced ease, her paddle moving in steady rhythm, left side, right side, left side, right side. Her father Marcus was on the shore, setting up a picnic at their usual spot, the place they'd been coming to since Emma was a little girl. He glanced up every few minutes, watching her navigate the rapids with the pride of a father who'd taught his daughter to be fearless and capable. She waved at him, her smile bright and carefree, and he waved back. What neither of them saw was the submerged log. Spring runoff had brought it down from upstream, a massive piece of deadfall lurking just below the surface in a section of rapids that had been clear a week ago. Emma hit it at full speed. The impact flipped her kayak instantly. One moment she was upright and in control. The next, the world inverted. Cold water shocked her system, disorienting her completely. She tried to wet exit, the maneuver she practiced 100 times, but something was wrong. The current had pushed her kayak against a rock, pinning her leg. She was trapped underwater, upside down, the river roaring around her. Panic set in immediately. Emma pulled at her spray skirt, trying to free herself, but the pressure of the water made it impossible. Her lungs started to burn. She could see light filtering through the water above her, could see the shadow of her kayak, but she couldn't reach the surface. Couldn't breathe. The cold water was sapping her strength with terrifying speed. 30 seconds underwater. 45. Her movements became sluggish. The burning in her lungs turned into a desperate, clawing need for air that overrode every other thought. On the shore, Marcus saw the kayak flip, saw it stay down, saw that Emma wasn't coming up. He ran toward the water, his boots pounding against the rocky shore, his heart exploding with terror. But Marcus couldn't swim well, had never been comfortable in water deeper than a swimming pool. And these rapids, this current, it would kill him as surely as it was killing his daughter. Get up, Emma. Get up. Please get up. But she wasn't coming up. The yellow kayak bobbed in the current, caught against the rocks, and his daughter was underneath it, drowning, and Marcus was 60 yards away and completely, absolutely helpless. Someone else was watching. Someone nobody in this town had noticed for 8 months. Someone who'd been preparing for exactly this kind of moment, even though he'd hoped he'd never need to use that training again. Eli Martinez had been sitting outside his tent in the small homeless encampment along the river, reading a book he'd borrowed from the library, when he heard the shout. His head snapped up just in time to see the kayak flip, just in time to see it stay down, just in time to understand what was happening. MarineCorps training kicked in before his conscious mind even processed the decision. Water rescue, combat swimmer qualification, the drills they'd run until they became muscle memory. Eli was on his feet and running before he even dropped the book. His boots came off in seconds. The worn jacket he'd gotten from the donation center hit the ground. And then Eli was in the water, diving into rapids that were 42 degrees and moving fast enough to kill an unprepared swimmer. The cold hit him like a physical blow, trying to force the air from his lungs, but Eli had trained him worse. Had done cold water drills in the Atlantic that made this feel almost warm by comparison. He swam hard against the current, using the techniques they drilled into him, reading the water, finding the paths of least resistance. He reached the kayak in 20 seconds, went under. The visibility was terrible, murky with sediment, but he could make out Emma's form, could see her trapped, could see that she wasn't moving anymore. Eli grabbed the kayak and pulled, using the current instead of fighting it, shifting the angle until the pressure released and Emma's leg came free. He grabbed her under the arms, kicked hard off the river bottom, and broke the surface. Emma wasn't breathing. Her lips were blue. Her eyes were closed. Eli had seen this before, too many times, in too many places he tried not to remember. But he wasn't in Hellman Province anymore. He was in a river in a small American town, and this woman wasn't going to die. Not today. Not on his watch. Eli fought the current, pulling Emma toward the shore, using every technique he'd learned about moving casualties in hostile environments. The river didn't want to let them go, kept trying to drag them back, but Eli was stronger than the current, stronger than the cold, stronger than the voice in his head that said he was too late, that he'd failed again. His feet hit solid ground. He dragged Emma onto the rocky shore and immediately started checking her airway. No breathing, no pulse he could detect. Her skin was that terrible gray-blue color that meant oxygen deprivation, that meant brain damage if he didn't act right now. CPR. Tilt the head. Check the airway. 2 rescue breaths. Watching her chest rise. Then compressions. 30 of them. Hard and fast. Eli's wet clothes clung to him, the April wind cutting through the fabric, but he didn't feel the cold. Didn't feel anything except the rhythm. The count. The desperate need to bring this young woman back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. His arms worked, his training overriding the exhaustion from fighting the current. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. He'd done this before. On a dusty road outside Kandahar. On a beach in North Carolina during training. 11, 12, 13. Sometimes it worked. 14, 15, 16. Sometimes it didn't. 17, 18, 19. But you always tried. 20, 21, 22. You always fought. 23, 24, 25. Because giving up wasn't an option. 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. 2 more breaths. 30 more compressions. The world narrowed to this. To the rhythm. To the count. To keeping this stranger alive. But Eli had a problem. A 6'2", 240-pound problem charging toward him at full sprint. And that problem wore a HellsAngels patch and looked ready to kill. Marcus Shaw had seen a stranger dive into the water, had seen him pull Emma out, had seen him put his hands on his daughter. And every protective instinct in Marcus's body, every ounce of violence he'd learned in 20 years of street life and 12 years in the club, concentrated into a single burning purpose. Get that stranger away from Emma. Protect his daughter. Eliminate the threat. Get away from her. Marcus's roar was thunder. It echoed across the river, bounced off the rocks, sent birds scattering from nearby trees. It was rage and terror mixed into pure sound. Eli heard it, heard the pounding of boots on stone, heard death coming for him. Every survival instinct screamed at him to run, to protect himself, to get away from the massive, furious man charging toward him. But he didn't stop, couldn't stop. 27 compressions. 28. 29. Marcus was 10 feet away, close enough that Eli could see the HellsAngels patch on his leather vest, close enough to see the tattoos covering his arms, close enough to see the absolute conviction in this man's eyes that Eli was a threat that needed to be eliminated immediately. 30 compressions. Marcus was 5 feet away. His hand was already reaching out, fingers extended toward Eli's wet shirt, ready to grab this stranger and throw him across the shoreline. And then Marcus's fingers closed on the fabric. His grip was iron. He was ready to hurl this man away from his daughter with every ounce of strength in his body. And Emma coughed. Water erupted from her mouth. Her body convulsed as her lungs expelled the river and desperately sucked in air. Her chest heaved. Once. Twice. 3 times. Color started creeping back in her face like dawn breaking over a gray landscape. Marcus froze. His hand still gripped Eli's shirt, but his eyes, his entire focus, locked onto his daughter. She was breathing. On her own. The terrible blue-gray color was fading, replaced by the pink flush of oxygenated blood reaching her skin. Emma's eyes fluttered open. Confused. Disoriented. Terrified. She looked up at the sky, then at the faces hovering above her. Her father's expression of absolute terror. A stranger's face, exhausted and relieved. Dad. Her voice was hoarse, raw from the water she'd inhaled. What happened? Marcus dropped to his knees, so hard it should have hurt. His grip on Eli's shirt released, completely forgotten, as both arms reached for Emma instead. He gathered her up carefully, desperately, checking her over with shaking hands. Baby, your kayak flipped. You were trapped. You weren't breathing. I thought. He couldn't finish. This man who'd been in bar fights and street brawls, who'd faced down rival clubs without flinching, who'd built a reputation on being unshakable, was openly crying. Tears cut tracks down his weathered face as he held his 22-year-old daughter like she was still a little girl. I don't remember, Emma said, her voice small and confused. I hit something, and then everything went dark. Cold. I couldn't get out. Marcus pulled her closer, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other wrapped around her shoulders. You're okay, he whispered, trying to convince himself as much as her. You're okay. You're okay. Over Emma's shoulder, Marcus's eyes found Eli. The man had backed up several feet, water still dripping from his clothes, ready to disappear, looking like someone who expected punishment for daring to help. And Marcus understood, really understood what he was seeing. This man, this stranger he'd been about to attack, had just dove in a freezing rapids and pulled his daughter from certain death, had performed CPR while Marcus was still running toward them, had kept going, kept fighting for Emma's life, even with the Hell's Angel charging at him screaming threats. You, Marcus's voice came out rough, thick with emotion. You saved her. Eli didn't respond, didn't know how to respond. His whole body was shaking now, adrenaline crash mixing with hypothermia from the cold water. His mind was still caught in the loop of compressions and breaths. And please live, please live, please live. You pulled her out of the river. Marcus said it again, like he needed to speak it aloud to make it real, to process what had just happened. You saved my daughter's life. Eli's eyes darted to Emma, who was now sitting up in her father's arms, coughing occasionally but breathing, alive, present. The gray-blue tint was completely gone from her skin. Her eyes were clear and focused. She was going to be okay. She was okay. The weight of that realization hit Eli all at once, and his legs gave out. He sat down hard on the rocky shore, his breathing coming in shaky gasps, his hands trembling in his lap. He'd done it. He'd actually done it. The thing he'd been trained to do but thought he'd never need again. He'd saved her. If you've ever felt invisible, truly invisible, like you're a ghost moving through a world that doesn't acknowledge your existence, then you know what Eli felt in that moment. You know the weight of being overlooked, of having people's eyes slide past you like you're not even there, of wondering if you matter at all to anyone. But in that moment on that rocky riverbank with a young woman breathing and a father staring at him with tears running down his face, Eli wasn't invisible. He was seen. He was real. He mattered. The ambulance arrived 12 minutes later, called by someone from the hiking trail who'd seen the whole thing. The paramedics wrapped Emma in thermal blankets, checked her vitals, started in 4. They asked Marcus what had happened, and he told them, his voice still shaking with adrenaline and relief. She went under. Trapped. Wasn't breathing when he pulled her out. This man, he did CPR. He brought her back. The lead paramedic, a woman named Rodriguez who'd been doing this job for 15 years, looked at Eli with professional assessment and genuine respect. You did good, she said. Real good. Another minute or two, and we'd be looking at severe brain damage. You saved her life. But when Marcus turned to thank Eli properly, to get his name, to do something, anything to acknowledge what this man had done, Eli was gone. Vanished back toward the homeless encampment like he'd never been there at all. Like he was a ghost who'd stepped into the light for one brief moment, and then disappeared again into the invisibility he'd learned to wear like armor. Marcus stood there on that rocky shore, watching the paramedics load Emma into the ambulance, and realized he didn't even know the name of the man who'd saved his daughter's life. On a beach in North Carolina, during training. 11, 12, 13. Sometimes it worked. 14, 15, 16. Sometimes it didn't. 17, 18, 19. But you always tried. 20, 21, 22. You always fought. 23, 24, 25. Because giving up wasn't an option. 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. 2 more breaths. 30 more compressions. The world narrowed to this. To the rhythm. To the count. To keeping this stranger alive. But Eli had a problem. A 6'2", 240-pound problem charging toward him at full sprint. And that problem wore a HellsAngels patch and looked ready to kill. Marcus Shaw had seen a stranger dive into the water. Had seen him pull Emma out. Had seen him put his hands on his daughter. And every protective instinct in Marcus's body, every ounce of violence he'd learned in 20 years of street life and 12 years in the club, concentrated into a single burning purpose. Get that stranger away from Emma. Protect his daughter. Eliminate the threat. Get away from her. Marcus's roar was thunder. It echoed across the river, bounced off the rocks, sent birds scattering from nearby trees. It was rage and terror mixed into pure sound. Eli heard it. Heard the pounding of boots on stone. Heard death coming for him. Every survival instinct screamed at him to run, to protect himself, to get away from the massive, furious man charging toward him. But he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. 27 compressions. 28. 29. Marcus was 10 feet away. Close enough that Eli could see the HellsAngels patch on his leather vest. Close enough to see the tattoos covering his arms. Close enough to see the absolute conviction in this man's eyes that Eli was a threat that needed to be eliminated immediately. 30 compressions. Marcus was 5 feet away. His hand was already reaching out, fingers extended toward Eli's wet shirt, ready to grab this stranger and throw him across the shoreline. And then Marcus's fingers closed on the fabric. His grip was iron. He was ready to hurl this man away from his daughter with every ounce of strength in his body. And Emma coughed. Water erupted from her mouth. Her body convulsed as her lungs expelled the river and desperately sucked in air. Her chest heaved. Once. Twice. 3 times. Color started creeping back in her face like dawn breaking over a gray landscape. Marcus froze. His hand still gripped Eli's shirt, but his eyes, his entire focus, locked onto his daughter. She was breathing. On her own. The terrible blue-gray color was fading, replaced by the pink flush of oxygenated blood reaching her skin. Emma's eyes fluttered open. Confused. Disoriented. Terrified. She looked up at the sky, then at the faces hovering above her. Her father's expression of absolute terror. A stranger's face, exhausted and relieved. Dad. Her voice was hoarse, raw from the water she'd inhaled. What happened? Marcus dropped to his knees, so hard it should have hurt. His grip on Eli's shirt released, completely forgotten, as both arms reached for Emma instead. He gathered her up carefully, desperately, checking her over with shaking hands. Baby, your kayak flipped. You were trapped. You weren't breathing. I thought. He couldn't finish. This man who'd been in bar fights and street brawls, who'd faced down rival clubs without flinching, who'd built a reputation on being unshakable, was openly crying. Tears cut tracks down his weathered face as he held his 22-year-old daughter like she was still a little girl. I don't remember, Emma said, her voice small and confused. I hit something, and then everything went dark. Cold. I couldn't get out. Marcus pulled her closer, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other wrapped around her shoulders. You're okay, he whispered, trying to convince himself as much as her. You're okay. You're okay. Over Emma's shoulder, Marcus's eyes found Eli. The man had backed up several feet, water still dripping from his clothes, ready to disappear, looking like someone who expected punishment for daring to help. And Marcus understood, really understood what he was seeing. This man, this stranger he'd been about to attack, had just dove in a freezing rapids and pulled his daughter from certain death. Had performed CPR while Marcus was still running toward them. Had kept going, kept fighting for Emma's life, even with the HellsAngel charging at him, screaming threats. You. Marcus's voice came out rough, thick with emotion. You saved her. Eli didn't respond. Didn't know how to respond. His whole body was shaking now, adrenaline crash mixing with hypothermia from the cold water. His mind was still caught in the loop of compressions and breaths. And please live, please live, please live. You pulled her out of the river. Marcus said it again, like he needed to speak it aloud to make it real, to process what had just happened. You saved my daughter's life. Eli's eyes darted to Emma, who was now sitting up in her father's arms, coughing occasionally but breathing, alive, present. The gray-blue tint was completely gone from her skin. Her eyes were clear and focused. She was going to be okay. She was okay. The weight of that realization hit Eli all at once, and his legs gave out. He sat down hard on the rocky shore, his breathing coming in shaky gasps, his hands trembling in his lap. He'd done it. He'd actually done it. The thing he'd been trained to do but thought he'd never need again. He'd saved her. If you've ever felt invisible, truly invisible, like you're a ghost moving through a world that doesn't acknowledge your existence, then you know what Eli felt in that moment. You know the weight of being overlooked, of having people's eyes slide past you like you're not even there, of wondering if you matter at all to anyone. But in that moment on that rocky riverbank with a young woman breathing and a father staring at him with tears running down his face, Eli wasn't invisible. He was seen. He was real. He mattered. The ambulance arrived 12 minutes later, called by someone from the hiking trail who'd seen the whole thing. The paramedics wrapped Emma in thermal blankets, checked her vitals, started in 4. They asked Marcus what had happened, and he told them, his voice still shaking with adrenaline and relief. She went under. Trapped. Wasn't breathing when he pulled her out. This man, he did CPR. He brought her back. The lead paramedic, a woman named Rodriguez who'd been doing this job for 15 years, looked at Eli with professional assessment and genuine respect. You did good, she said. Real good. Another minute or two, and we'd be looking at severe brain damage. You saved her life. But when Marcus turned to thank Eli properly, to get his name, to do something, anything to acknowledge what this man had done, Eli was gone. Vanished back toward the homeless encampment like he'd never been there at all. Like he was a ghost who'd stepped into the light for one brief moment, and then disappeared again into the invisibility he'd learned to wear like armor. Marcus stood there on that rocky shore, watching the paramedics load Emma into the ambulance, and realized he didn't even know the name of the man who'd saved his daughter's life. The ambulance took Emma to County General Hospital, sirens cutting through the quiet Saturday afternoon. Marcus rode with her, holding her hand the entire way, watching the monitors like if he looked away for even a second, she might slip away from him. The paramedics kept reassuring him she was stable, that her vitals were strong, but Marcus couldn't shake the image of her lifeless body on those rocks, of how close he'd come to losing her. The emergency room doctors ran a full workup, chest x-rays to check for fluid in the lungs, blood oxygen levels, neurological assessments to make sure there was no brain damage from oxygen deprivation. And every test came back clean. Emma Shaw was going to be fine. Sore, exhausted, traumatized, but fine. Without immediate intervention, Dr. Sarah Patel told Marcus in the hallway outside Emma's room, your daughter would have drowned. The water temperature, the time she was submerged, the lack of oxygen to the brain, we'd be looking at severe neurological damage at minimum. More likely, she simply wouldn't have made it. Whoever pulled her out and performed CPR gave her back her life. Marcus stood in that sterile hospital hallway, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and realized he didn't even know who that person was. A stranger. A man who'd appeared out of nowhere, risked his own life in freezing rapids, brought Emma back from death, and then vanished like smoke. But Marcus had noticed something. The man's clothes. Worn, layered, the kind of outfit someone wears when they're living outside. The way he'd been soaking wet, but had no car, no vehicle visible anywhere nearby. The direction he'd disappeared toward. The river encampment where the homeless population set up tents in the woods along the water. The man who saved his daughter was homeless, and Marcus was going to find him. To understand what happened next, you need to know who Eli Martinez really was. Because this man kneeling on those rocks performing CPR wasn't always invisible. 2 years ago, Eli had structure, purpose. He was a United States Marine, 22 years old, serving his second deployment. Infantry unit, stationed mostly at Camp Leatherneck in Helmand Province, Afghanistan. He'd joined right out of high school, driven by a desire to serve, to be part of something bigger than himself, to make his mother proud. Sarah Martinez had raised Eli alone after his father left when Eli was 3. She'd worked as a nurse at County General, pulling double shifts to keep their small apartment and put food on the table. She'd been everything to him: mother, father, best friend, cheerleader. When Eli shipped out for his first deployment, she'd hugged him at the airport and told him to come home safe, that she'd be waiting for him. She died 3 months into his second deployment. Sudden cardiac arrest during her shift at the hospital. The same undiagnosed heart condition that had probably killed Eli's grandmother. Genetic but silent until it wasn't. By the time the Red Cross notification reached Eli in Afghanistan, his mother had already been buried for 5 days. He'd missed her funeral, missed the chance to say goodbye, missed everything. The Corps gave him emergency leave. He flew home to an empty apartment filled with her things, and the crushing reality that the one person who'd always been there for him was gone. He had 2 weeks to grieve, to process, to somehow make sense of a world without her in it. And then he had to go back, had to finish his deployment, had to keep functioning like his world hadn't just ended. Something broke in Eli during those final 4 months overseas. The other Marines noticed it. His squad leader noticed it. But nobody quite knew how to help, and Eli didn't know how to ask. He did his job, followed orders, came home when his enlistment ended with an honorable discharge and a head full of memories he couldn't process. The VA promised help, promised counseling for the PTSD that was obvious to everyone who knew him, promised job placement assistance, promised housing support. But the VA was overwhelmed, understaffed, drowning in claims from veterans who needed help. Eli's intake appointment was scheduled for 6 months out. His counseling referral got lost in paperwork. His housing application sat in a queue with 10,000 others. Eli tried to hold it together. He got a job at a warehouse, but the forklift alarm sounded too much like incoming mortars, and he'd hit the ground twice before they let him go. He got another job at a grocery store, but working with the public when you're fighting panic attacks and can't sleep more than 2 hours at a time isn't sustainable. He lost that job too. His savings ran out. The small amount his mother had left went to pay her final medical bills. The rent came due, and Eli didn't have it. The eviction notice gave him 30 days. 8 months ago, Eli had made a choice. He could keep fighting a system that clearly wasn't designed to help people like him, could keep trying to fit into a society that felt alien and hostile after everything he'd seen. Or he could step away, become invisible, survive on his own terms. He'd packed everything he owned into a military surplus backpack, bought a decent tent from an outdoor store, and joined a homeless encampment along the Clearwater River. About 15 people lived there at any given time. Other vets, mostly. People who'd fallen through the same cracks Eli had. They looked out for each other, shared resources, and asked no questions about anyone's past. Eli set up his tent in a spot shaded by pine trees, close enough to the water to hear it at night. He had a sleeping bag rated for cold weather, a camp stove for cooking, and a routine that kept him sane. Morning run along the river, day at the library reading, or using the computers to apply for jobs he never heard back from. Afternoon at the community center, where they served one hot meal. Evening back at the tent, reading by flashlight until exhaustion finally dragged him into a few hours of fitful sleep. He'd been living like this for 8 months. 8 months of being invisible, of having people's eyes slide past him on the street like he wasn't there, of being escorted out of businesses for loitering when all he was doing was trying to stay warm, of being told to move along by police who saw a homeless vet as a problem to be relocated, not a person to be helped. The Marine Corps had taught Eli a lot of things. Combat skills, survival skills, water rescue techniques that he'd practiced until they became second nature. They'd taught him to never leave a man behind, to always complete the mission, to adapt and overcome no matter the circumstances. They just hadn't taught him how to live in a country that had no idea what to do with soldiers once the war was over. Now, on a Saturday evening, after pulling a drowning woman from the river, Eli sat in his tent wringing out his wet clothes and wondering if he'd done the right thing. The father had been furious, had looked ready to kill him. Maybe he'd be back with the police. Maybe Eli had just brought trouble down on the whole encampment. Maybe staying invisible really was safer. Marcus Shaw started his search the next morning. Sunday. Emma was being kept overnight for observation, but was stable and lucid and kept asking about the man who'd saved her. Did we get his name, Dad? Did we thank him? I need to thank him. Marcus had no answers, so he went looking. He started at the river encampment, drove his pickup as close as he could, then walked into the woods following the well-worn path. He found a cluster of tents set back from the trail, a small community of people society had decided weren't worth seeing. Marcus's HellsAngels vest drew immediate attention. Eyes followed him with wariness, with the careful neutrality of people who'd learned that strangers often meant trouble. But Marcus wasn't here for trouble. He approached an older man sitting by a small campfire, brewing coffee in a battered pot. The man had a gray beard and eyes that had seen too much. Military bearing, still visible despite the worn clothes. "Morning," Marcus said, keeping his voice respectful. "I'm looking for someone. Man, mid-20s, dark hair. He pulled my daughter from the river yesterday. Save her life. I need to thank him." The older man studied Marcus for a long moment, studied the patch on his vest, studied his face. Then he jerked his head toward a tent set apart from the others, under a stand of pine trees. "Eli. Keeps to himself mostly. Good kid. MarineCorps. System failed him like it fails most of us." Marcus nodded his thanks and walked toward the tent. It was a small two-person hiking tent, well-maintained despite obvious age. A pair of boots sat outside, still damp from yesterday's river. Through the partially open flap, Marcus could see Eli inside, reading a book. "Eli," Marcus called out softly. "Can I talk to you?" Eli's head snapped up, his body tensing instantly. He recognized Marcus immediately. The father, the Hell's Angel, the man who'd grabbed him yesterday. Fight or flight warred in his expression. Hey, Marcus said quickly, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to talk. Please." The silence stretched for a long moment. Then Eli slowly emerged from the tent, standing but keeping distance between himself and Marcus. He was taller than he'd seemed yesterday, lean and wiry with the build of someone who'd been hungry more often than not. "Your daughter okay?" Eli asked, his voice quiet but steady. "She's perfect. Because of you." Marcus's voice cracked slightly on the words. "The doctor said another minute or two, and we'd have lost her. You saved her life." Eli nodded, looking uncomfortable with the gratitude, like he didn't know what to do with it. "I need to know your name," Marcus continued. "My daughter needs to know who to thank." "Eli Martinez." "Eli," Marcus repeated. "MarineCorps?" "Yes, sir. Infantry. 2 deployments." "When did you get out?" "About a year ago." "Honorable discharge." Marcus looked at this young man, this veteran who'd served his country and ended up living in a tent by a river, and felt something shift in his chest. Anger, but not at Eli. Anger at a system that could let this happen. At a country that sent young men to war and then forgot about them when they came home broken. "The VA helping you out?" Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. Eli's laugh was bitter. "They're trying. Got an appointment scheduled for next month. Been waiting 8 months for it." Marcus pulled out his wallet and extracted several bills. Eli immediately shook his head, backing up a step. "I don't want your money," Eli said firmly. "It's not charity," Marcus said. "It's a debt. You saved my daughter. Let me at least buy you a decent meal. A hot shower somewhere. Some dry clothes." "I'm fine." "Brother, you're living in a tent." "You're not fine." The word brother seemed to catch Eli off guard. His eyes narrowed slightly, suspicious but also something else. Hopeful maybe, like he'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone call him that, and mean it. "Why do you care?" Eli asked. "You don't know me." "Because you didn't have to dive into that river," Marcus said simply. "You didn't have to risk hypothermia, drowning, to save a stranger. But you did. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are." "I was trained for it," Eli said, like that explained everything. "Water rescue. Combat life-saving. It's just what I know how to do." "Most people with that training would have watched from shore and waited for emergency services," Marcus countered. "You didn't hesitate. You just acted. That's character, Eli. That's brotherhood." The word hung in the air between them. Brotherhood. The thing Eli had lost when he left the Marines. The thing he'd been searching for in all the wrong places. The thing he didn't think he'd ever find again. "Look," Marcus said, putting the money back in his wallet since Eli clearly wasn't going to take it. "At least let me buy you breakfast. There's a diner in town. Best pancakes you've ever had. We can talk. No strings attached. Just one veteran to another. You're military?" Eli asked, surprised. Army. Long time ago. Did my 4 years. Got out, found a different kind of brotherhood. Eli hesitated, clearly torn between the ingrained suspicion of someone who'd been disappointed too many times and the desperate need for human connection that he'd been denying for 8 months. Just breakfast, Marcus said again, and a chance to say thank you properly. After a long moment, Eli nodded. Okay, just breakfast. They drove to the diner in Marcus's pickup truck, and for the first 20 minutes, they barely spoke. Marcus didn't push, didn't ask invasive questions, just drove and let Eli get comfortable with the situation. The diner was a local institution, chrome and red vinyl booze, the smell of coffee and bacon thick in the air. The waitress knew Marcus, greeted him with familiarity, and didn't even blink at Eli's worn clothes and the fact that he clearly hadn't showered in days. They ordered. Marcus got the full breakfast special. Eli ordered just coffee, until Marcus ordered for him anyway. Pancakes, eggs, bacon, hash browns. The works. When was the last time you had a real meal? Marcus asked when the waitress was gone. Eli shrugged. Community center serves dinner most nights. It's adequate. That's not what I asked. The food arrived and Eli tried to eat slowly, tried to maintain dignity, but his hunger betrayed him. He was 3 bites in before he realized Marcus was just drinking coffee, watching him with an expression that was part pity, part anger, part something else Eli couldn't quite identify. Emma wants to meet you, Marcus said finally. When she's out of the hospital, she wants to thank you herself. She doesn't need to. Yeah, she does. Marcus leaned forward, elbows on the table. Listen, Eli, I know we just met. I know you've got no reason to trust me or anyone else, but I'm going to be straight with you. The HellsAngels, we take care of our own. Veterans especially. A lot of us served. A lot of us know what it's like to come home and feel like you don't fit anymore. I appreciate that, but just hear me out. Marcus interrupted gently. We've got resources, connections, people who can help cut through VA red tape, people who can help with housing, jobs, getting you back on your feet. Not charity, not a handout, just brothers helping brothers the way it's supposed to work. Why? Eli asked, the question that had been burning in his mind since Marcus showed up at his tent. Why would you do that for someone you don't know? Because you saved my daughter, Marcus said simply. And because nobody who served this country should be sleeping in a tent by a river, waiting 8 months for help that might never come. Eli stared at his plate, at the food he was eating that he couldn't afford, at the kindness being offered by a stranger in a HellsAngels vest, and felt something crack open in his chest. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. If you believe that every veteran deserves someone who'll show up and actually help instead of just offering empty thank yous for their service, comment no more invisible veterans. Make your voice count. Let's show that people care about more than just flag waving. They care about action. That breakfast lasted 2 hours. Marcus asked questions, and Eli slowly, cautiously, answered them. Talked about his mom, about Afghanistan, about coming home to nothing, about the VA appointments that never happened, about choosing the tent over fighting a system that seemed designed to fail him. And Marcus listened, really listened, not with pity, but with understanding, with the recognition of someone who'd seen brothers go through similar struggles and knew that sometimes the system needed to be bypassed entirely. When they finally left the diner, Marcus made Eli a promise. Give me 72 hours, Marcus said. I'm going to talk to some people, see what we can do. No pressure, no obligations. You can say no to anything we offer, but at least give me a chance to try. Eli wanted to say no, wanted to protect himself from the disappointment that seemed inevitable. But something in Marcus's eyes, something genuine and determined, made him nod instead. Okay, 72 hours. Marcus dropped Eli back at the river encampment and drove straight to the clubhouse. It was Sunday, which meant most of the brothers would be there for the regular weekly meeting they called church. 23 men total in the Clearwater chapter, each one of Brother Marcus would ride through hell for. He walked into the clubhouse, and every conversation stopped. The brothers knew that look on Marcus's face, knew it meant something important was about to happen. We need to talk, Marcus said. All of us. Right now. They gathered in the meeting room, leather vests and serious expressions, and Marcus told them everything. The drowning, the rescue, the homeless Marine living in a tent, the system that had failed him, and the debt of gratitude that Marcus believed the entire club owed to this stranger who'd saved one of their own. Emma's family. Marcus finished. You all know that. Which means the man who saved her is family too, whether he knows it yet or not. We take care of our own. Always. So here's what I'm proposing. For the next hour, they planned, called in favors, made commitments, activated the network of connections that the HellsAngels had built over decades of brotherhood and mutual support. And 72 hours later, everything changed. Marcus had found Eli. Now came the hard part. Convincing a veteran who'd been abandoned by every system meant to support him that this brotherhood, this family, was different. That some promises actually get kept. That invisible doesn't have to be permanent. The rumble started small, distant, like thunder rolling in from miles away, the kind that makes you look up at the sky wondering if a storm is coming. Eli was sitting outside his tent on Tuesday morning, exactly 72 hours after Marcus had dropped him off at the encampment. He was reading the same book he'd been trying to finish for 3 weeks, his mind too restless to focus on the words. Marcus had said 72 hours, but Eli had learned not to get his hopes up. People made promises all the time. Following through was different. That's when he heard it. 1 motorcycle engine, then 2, then 5. The sound built like a wave, not just passing through on a nearby road, but coming closer, coming directly toward the encampment with absolute certainty, with purpose. 10 motorcycles became 15. 15 became 20. The rumble became a roar that echoed through the trees and made the ground vibrate. The other residents of the encampment emerged from their tents, eyes wide, bodies tense. Everyone knew what that sound meant. Motorcycles in formation meant clubs. Clubs meant territory disputes. Territory disputes meant violence. And homeless camps were often caught in the crossfire. 23 motorcycles appeared on the trail, moving slowly in perfect formation. Chrome gleaming in the morning sunlight, filtering through the pine trees. Leather and metal and the raw power of engines that you could feel in your chest. Each rider wore the same patch on their back. HellsAngels. Clearwater chapter. And they stopped right in front of Eli's tent. Every single one. Engines cutting off in sequence, one after another, until the roar faded to silence, and 23 grown men sat astride their bikes, all facing the Marine veteran who'd frozen with his back against a pine tree, his book fallen forgotten at his feet. The other camp residents had scattered, disappearing into the woods with the survival instinct of people who'd learned that when trouble showed up, you made yourself invisible. But Eli couldn't move, couldn't run, could only stand there wondering what he'd done, what trouble he'd brought down on this place, whether Marcus's kindness had been a setup for something worse. Marcus stepped off his bike first. He walked toward Eli slowly, deliberately, his boots crunching on the pine needles and dirt. And he wasn't alone. Behind him, 23 men followed, forming a semicircle around Eli. Not trapping him, not threatening him, just there, present. A brotherhood making a statement that nobody in that encampment had ever seen before. "We've been looking for you, brother," Marcus said, his voice carrying in the morning stillness. Brother. That word again. Not kid, not vet, not homeless guy. Brother. Eli's eyes were wide, confused, his heart hammering against his ribs. He had no idea what was happening, couldn't process why these men, these HellsAngels, had come here in force. Marcus reached into his saddlebag and pulled out something wrapped in brown paper, tied with leather cord. He stopped a few feet from Eli, close enough to talk, but far enough to not crowd him, to give him space. 72 hours ago, I made you a promise, Marcus said. I told you I'd see what we could do. The brothers and I, we've been busy. He held out the brown paper package. Eli's hand shook as he took it, his fingers fumbling with the leather cord. He unwrapped it slowly, afraid of what he'd find, afraid this was all some elaborate joke he didn't understand yet. Inside was leather, soft and supple, clearly new, smelling rich and clean. A vest, adult-sized, cut to fit someone Eli's build. No patches on it yet because patches had to be earned, had to mean something. But the leather itself, the vest itself, was everything. It was protection. It was belonging. It was family. You saved one of ours, Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. That makes you one of ours. The HellsAngels don't forget our debts, Eli. And we don't abandon our brothers. Ever. He pulled out a patch from his pocket. Leather backing, with careful embroidered stitching. 2 words that Eli had a blink to read through the sudden blur in his eyes. Support member. You're not a full patch member, Marcus explained. That takes years to earn, and it's not something we're offering lightly. But you're family now. Support member means you're under our protection. Means we've got your back. Means you're not invisible anymore, brother. We see you. Behind Marcus, 23 grown men stood in that clearing, morning light filtering through the pines, and some of them had tears in their eyes. These men who'd built reputations on being tough, on being the kind of guys you didn't mess with, stood there openly emotional as one of their own welcomed a homeless veteran into the Brotherhood. Because they understood. Many of them had served. Many of them knew what it was like to come home and feel lost. Many of them had been saved by this very Brotherhood when they had nowhere else to turn. This was what the HellsAngels were really about, beneath all the stereotypes and the movies and the reputation. This was family taking care of family. Eli held that vest in his trembling hands and couldn't speak. For 8 months, he'd been invisible. For 8 months, people had looked through him like he wasn't there, like he didn't matter, like he was a problem to be avoided rather than a person deserving of dignity. And now, 23 men on motorcycles were telling him the exact opposite. We're telling him he mattered. We're telling him he belonged. That's not all, Marcus said gently. We've been making some calls, pulling some strings, and we've got some things lined up for you if you want them. Over the next 15 minutes, Marcus laid it out. The brothers had mobilized their entire network, had called in favors, had made things happen that the VA couldn't manage in 8 months. Tommy, who owned the bike shop on 5th Street, needed a mechanic. Someone who could learn the trade, who was reliable, who had the discipline and work ethic that military service instilled. The job was Eli's if he wanted it. Real pay, not just charity. Vincent Caruso, a landlord who owned properties throughout town and who owed the club more than one favor, had a studio apartment above his dry cleaning business. Small but clean and safe. First 3 months rent-free while Eli got on his feet. After that, reduced rent that Tommy's wages could cover. Dr. Raymond Shun, a physician who ran the Veterans Clinic and who'd served as an Army medic in Desert Storm, had connections at the VA. He'd already pulled Eli's file, already started cutting through the red tape. Counseling appointments were being scheduled. Benefits paperwork was being expedited. The system that had ignored Eli for 8 months was suddenly paying attention. The community center had offered free meals for as long as Eli needed them. The thrift store downtown had set aside clothes, real work clothes that fit. The local gym, owned by a former Marine who'd done 3 tours in Iraq, offered a free membership, so Eli had a place to shower and work out and feel human again. Marcus told Eli all of this while the 23 brothers stood witness, and Eli felt his legs give out. He sat down hard on the ground outside his tent, the leather vest still clutched in his hands, and started to cry. Not silent tears, not dignified grief, but gasping, choking sobs that shook his whole body. Because for the first time in a year, since his mother died, since he came home broken, since the system failed him and the world decided he didn't matter, someone was showing up. Someone was keeping their promises. Someone was telling him he deserved better than a tent in the woods and waiting for help that never came. Marcus knelt down beside him, put a hand on his shoulder, and let him cry. Let him release everything he'd been holding in for so long. The other brothers stood silent, respectful, understanding that some moments are sacred and need to happen without interference. When Eli finally caught his breath, when the sobs subsided into shaky breathing, Marcus spoke quietly. You don't have to accept any of this if you don't want to. No pressure, no obligations. But we'd be honored to have you as part of our family, brother. Honored to help you get back on your feet. Eli looked up at this man he'd known for 3 days, at the 23 others standing in formation behind him, at the leather vest that represented belonging and protection and family, and nodded. Yes. His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. Yes. Please. I need. He couldn't finish, but he didn't have to. Marcus understood. Then welcome to the family, brother. Within 72 hours of that moment in the woods, the HellsAngels had transformed Eli's life. The change was so swift, so complete, it felt almost surreal. Tommy's bike shop became Eli's new home away from home. The work was hard, physically demanding, learning the intricacies of motorcycle mechanics from a man who'd been doing it for 30 years. But it was honest work. Purpose. Structure. The kind of routine that Eli's military mind craved. Tommy was patient, understanding when Eli had bad days, when the sounds of impact wrenches triggered memories of gunfire, when he needed to step outside and breathe. The studio apartment above the dry cleaners was small, barely 400 square feet, with a kitchenette along one wall and a bathroom that could charitably be called compact. But it was his. Clean, safe, with a lock on the door that Eli controlled and windows that let in actual sunlight. The first night he slept there, in a real bed with actual sheets and a pillow that didn't smell like mildew, Eli woke up 3 times convinced he was dreaming. Dr. Chin got him into counseling within a week. The VA therapist, Dr. Lisa Morrison, specialized in PTSD and combat trauma. She didn't judge, didn't push, just created a space where Eli could finally talk about Afghanistan, about losing his mother while deployed, about the survivor's guilt that ate at him in the dark hours of the night. For the first time since coming home, Eli had someone who understood that healing wasn't linear, that some wounds don't close quickly, but that with support and time, they can become bearable. The HellsAngels checked on him regularly. Marcus stopped by the bike shop most days, just to see how he was doing. Other brothers would swing by the apartment, bring food, invite him to rides and barbecues. They didn't treat him like a charity case. They treated him like family, like someone who mattered, like someone worth investing in. 3 weeks after the motorcycles rolled into the encampment, Eli walked into his new apartment to find a note on the small kitchen table. Marcus's blocky handwriting on a piece of paper folded in half. Emma's home from school for the weekend. She wants to meet you. Sunday, 2 p.m., our house. No pressure if you're not ready. But she really wants to say thank you. Address below. Eli stood in his small apartment, holding that note, and realized he wanted to meet her too. Wanted to see with his own eyes that she was okay, that the young woman he'd pulled from the river had fully recovered. Wanted to close that loop. Sunday at 2 p.m., Eli knocked on the door of Marcus's house. It was a modest brick ranch in a quiet neighborhood, well-maintained with a garden that someone clearly cared about. Marcus answered the door with a smile. "Come in, brother. Emma's been driving me crazy all weekend waiting for this." Emma Shaw was sitting in the living room, and when Eli walked in, she stood up immediately. She was 22 years old, vibrant and alive, with her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn chin. The gray-blue pallor of near death was gone, replaced by healthy color and a smile that was warm and genuine. "You're Eli," she said, and before he could respond, she crossed the room and hugged him. Hard, like she was hugging someone who'd given her back her life. Because he had. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for not hesitating, for jumping in, for bringing me back. I wouldn't be here without you." Eli stood awkwardly in this embrace, not used to physical affection, not used to gratitude of this magnitude, and felt his eyes burn with tears again. "Just did what I was trained to do," he managed. Emma pulled back, holding him at arm's length, looking him straight in the eyes. "No, you did what you chose to do. There's a difference. You didn't have to jump in those rapids. You chose to. And I'm alive because you made that choice. That's heroism, Eli. That's what being a real hero looks like." They spent the afternoon together, the 3 of them. Emma told Eli about her studies, her plans to work in environmental conservation, her determination to appreciate every single day in a way she never had before. Marcus grilled burgers on the back patio. They talked about everything and nothing, and for a few hours, Eli felt something he hadn't felt in over a year. He felt normal. He felt like he belonged. But not everyone was happy about what the HellsAngels had done. Sometimes the system fights back when you try to work around it. And sometimes the people who are supposed to help become the biggest obstacle to change. The opposition came from an unexpected quarter. City Council member Patricia Hargrove had been trying to clean up Clearwater's image for 3 years, trying to attract more businesses, more tourism, more development. And part of her vision for a better Clearwater didn't include homeless encampments or motorcycle clubs running unofficial veteran outreach programs. She heard about what the HellsAngels had done for Eli Martinez, heard about the job, the apartment, the support network, and instead of seeing it as community members stepping up where the system had failed, she saw it as a motorcycle gang recruiting vulnerable people, saw it as a PR stunt, saw it as the HellsAngels expanding their influence in ways that made her uncomfortable. Patricia called for a city council hearing to investigate the HellsAngels veteran outreach activities. She used words like exploitation and recruitment, an unregulated charitable activity. She suggested that motorcycle clubs shouldn't be allowed to provide housing or employment to vulnerable populations without oversight. She painted the Hells Angels as predators and veterans like Eli as victims who needed protecting from the very people helping them. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday evening in late May. The council chambers were packed. On one side sat Patricia Hargrove and her supporters, well-dressed community members who'd never missed a meal or worried about where they'd sleep. On the other side sat the Hells Angels, 23 men in leather vests, and scattered among them, veterans they'd helped over the years. Men and women who'd been where Eli was and had found their way back with the club support. Marcus sat at the front table with the club's lawyer, a sharp woman named Jennifer Ramirez who'd been defending the Hells Angels for a decade and knew exactly how to fight this kind of bureaucratic warfare. Eli sat beside them, wearing a button-down shirt that Emma had helped him pick out, his Hells Angels support vest visible on the chair beside him. Patricia Hargrove opened with her statement, painted a picture of vulnerable veterans being taken advantage of by an organization with documented criminal connections, suggested that proper oversight and regulation were needed to protect people like Eli from exploitation. Then the testimonies began. First up was Tommy from the bike shop. He stood at the podium, this gruff 60-year-old veteran who'd served in Vietnam and had been running his business for 40 years. Eli Martinez is the best employee I've had in a decade, Tommy said bluntly. Shows up on time, works hard, learns fast. I didn't hire him because the club asked me to. I hired him because he's good at the job, and he deserves a chance. You want to talk about exploitation? Let's talk about a system that left this young man sleeping in a tent for 8 months while he waited for help that never came. Next was Dr. Chun from the Veterans Clinic. He testified about the VA's failures, about the thousands of veterans falling through cracks in the system, about how community support networks, including motorcycle clubs, were often the only thing keeping veterans alive. The Hells Angels veteran outreach has saved more lives than you know, Dr. Chin said, looking directly at Patricia Hargrove. They cut through red tape. They make things happen. They show up. That's more than I can say for most government programs. Vincent Caruso, the landlord, testified about providing housing. I've run into a lot of people over the years. Some pay, some don't. Some trash the place, some don't. Eli takes care of that apartment like it's a palace. He's quiet, respectful, pays his rent on time now that he's working. You want to shut down programs that turn homeless veterans into reliable tenants? Good luck finding voters who will support that. Other veterans testified. Men and women the Hells Angels had helped. Job placements, housing assistance, someone who showed up when they were at rock bottom and gave them a reason to keep fighting. The testimonies built like a wave, each one more powerful than the last. And then Emma walked to the podium, 22 years old, wearing a yellow dress, carrying the same quiet confidence her father had. The room fell silent. My name is Emma Shaw. 5 weeks ago, I drowned in the Clearwater River. She let that sentence sit for a moment. I was trapped underwater, not breathing, dying. And Eli Martinez, a homeless veteran that our city had decided wasn't worth helping, dove into freezing rapids and saved my life. She looked at Patricia Hargrove. You want to talk about the Hells Angels exploiting people? Let's talk about what exploitation really looks like. Exploitation is sending young people to war and then forgetting about them when they come home broken. Exploitation is making a veteran wait 8 months for a counseling appointment. Exploitation is forcing someone who served this country to sleep in a tent because the system can't be bothered to help. Emma's voice rose, passionate and fierce. The Hells Angels didn't exploit Eli. They saw him. They valued him. They gave him what our city, our state, our country failed to give him: dignity, purpose, family. And if you shut down their veteran outreach program, you're not protecting anyone. You're just making sure that the next veteran who needs help stays invisible. The room erupted in applause. Patricia Hargrove tried to restore order, but the message was clear. The community wasn't on her side. Finally, Eli stood and walked to the podium. He'd never spoken publicly before, had never wanted to draw attention to himself. But this mattered. These people who'd shown up for him deserved to have his voice added to theirs. My name is Eli Martinez, he began, his voice quiet but steady. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I served 2 deployments in Afghanistan. I came home to nothing. My mother had died while I was deployed. The VA couldn't help me. I couldn't hold a job. I lost my apartment. And for 8 months, I lived in a tent by the river wondering if anyone would even notice if I disappeared. He paused, looking around the room. Then I saved a young woman's life. And Marcus Shaw, a man I'd never met, a Hell's Angel that society tells us to fear, showed up. He didn't just thank me. He saw me. He asked what I needed. And then he made it happen. He and his brothers gave me a job, an apartment, help navigating the VA, counseling, a support system, a family. Eli's eyes found Patricia Hargrove. You want to protect veterans from the Hell's Angels? Protect us from a system that fails us instead. Protect us from being invisible. Protect us from being forgotten. The Hell's Angels didn't exploit me. They saved me, just like I saved Emma. And if you shut down their program, you're telling every veteran in this town that when the system fails them, they're on their own. That nobody's coming to help. The room exploded with applause again. People stood. Veterans saluted. The Hell's Angels remained seated, but nodded their respect. The city council voted. 7 members total. They needed 4 votes to approve Patricia Hargrove's proposed regulations. The vote was 6-1 against. Only Patricia voted yes. But the council went further. They passed a resolution officially recognizing the Hell's Angels Veteran Outreach Program as a community service initiative. They voted to allocate city funds to support similar programs. They invited Marcus to sit on a new committee focused on veteran services and homeless outreach. Patricia Hargrove had tried to shut them down and instead had given them official recognition and government support. Marcus stood outside the council chambers afterward, surrounded by his brothers, and started laughing. The kind of laugh that comes from relief and vindication and the pure absurdity of bureaucrats trying to stop people from helping each other. Eli stood beside him, wearing his support vest now, and felt something shift inside his chest. For 8 months, he'd been invisible. For 8 months, he believed he didn't matter. And tonight, a room full of people had stood up and said he was wrong, had said his life had value, had said his service mattered, had said he deserved better. Sometimes angels wear leather vests. Sometimes heroes are the ones society tells you to fear. Sometimes family isn't born. It's chosen by people who show up when everything else fails. 6 months later, the story had spread far beyond Clearwater. Local news picked it up first, then regional outlets, then national ones. The Hell's Angels, usually portrayed as outlaws and criminals, were being celebrated as veterans advocates. The story went viral. Homeless Marine saves drowning woman. Biker Club saves homeless Marine. It was the kind of narrative that restored faith in humanity, that reminded people goodness still existed. Other motorcycle clubs started paying attention. The Iron Riders in Detroit launched a formal veteran mentorship program, partnering with local VA services. The Desert Rats in Arizona created a job training initiative specifically for homeless vets. The Coastal Brothers in Oregon started a transitional housing program. The idea spread like wildfire across the country. Strength used for building up instead of tearing down. Brotherhood extended to those who needed it most. The Clearwater Hell's Angels became a model. Other chapters visited, learned their system, replicated it in their own communities. Within a year, the informal veteran outreach program had helped 43 veterans get housing, jobs, and VA benefits. 43 invisible people suddenly seen. Fundraising exploded. The local community center received enough donations to hire a full-time veteran services coordinator. The homeless encampment by the river was transformed into a sanctioned transitional camp with proper facilities, managed by the city in partnership with veteran organizations. Eli's story became the blueprint for how communities could support veterans when government systems failed. The city council passed legislation they called the Martinez Initiative. It required the city to partner with community organizations, including motorcycle clubs, to provide rapid response support for homeless veterans. It allocated funding. It created accountability. One drowning, one rescue, one biker showing up had changed how an entire city approached veteran services. Eli now managed the Hell's Angels Veteran Outreach Program full-time. He'd been promoted from Tommy's shop to coordinator, working with new veterans, helping them navigate the same systems that had failed him, making sure nobody waited 8 months for help that should come immediately. He stood in front of groups of homeless veterans at shelters and encampments, wearing his support vest, and told them something important. You're not invisible. You matter. You serve this country, and you deserve better than what you've gotten. We're here to help. Not someday. Not when the paperwork clears. Right now. Today. That's what brotherhood means. And every single time Eli spoke to those groups, Marcus stood in the back of the room. Emma usually stood beside him, her hand in her father's, watching this man, this brother, teach hope to strangers. Sometimes angels wear mismatched shoes and sleep in tents. Sometimes heroes are the ones society overlooks. Sometimes family isn't born. It's chosen by people who decide that showing up matters more than anything else. Here's what I need you to understand. Right now, as you're listening to this story, there are thousands of invisible veterans, living in tents, living in cars, sleeping on the streets, waiting for help from systems that are overwhelmed and underfunded, wondering if their service mattered, wondering if anyone cares. The system that's supposed to protect them, sometimes it becomes the very thing they're running from. The bureaucracy that's supposed to help, sometimes it's the biggest obstacle to getting better. And the people society tells you to fear, the bikers in leather vests with patches and tattoos, sometimes they're the heroes who show up when everyone else looks away. So here's what we're doing. First, subscribe to this channel, because hitting that button means you're choosing to see people others ignore. You're standing against the bureaucrats who wanted to shut down programs that actually work. The trolls who say veterans should pull themselves up by their bootstraps without any help. They won't subscribe, but you will. Second, comment veterans deserve support. Every comment is a vote. For action over red tape. For community over bureaucracy. For people who show up over systems that fail. Make your voice count. Let's flood this section with people who believe our veterans earn better than what they're getting. Third, share this video. Someone in your life needs to remember that one person can change everything. That the next time they see a homeless veteran, they might choose to see them, to help them, to show up for them. Your share might reach someone who has the power to make a difference, but hasn't been moved to action yet. The cynics will say this story is too good to be true. The trolls will claim it's propaganda for motorcycle clubs. Patricia Hargrove probably still believes she was right. Marcus, Emma, and Eli don't care what the critics think. They're too busy helping the next veteran who needs support. Too busy proving that brotherhood beats bureaucracy every single time. Too busy teaching other communities that when you see invisible people and choose to help them, everybody wins. So what's it going to be? Will you scroll past this story and forget about it in 5 minutes? Or will you stand with the people who stop, who see, who save? Will you be someone who chooses to make invisible veterans visible? Will you support the communities and organizations doing the real work while the system fails? Welcome to the family.